I hope everybody had a good first day, even if you were just disengaging from your work week. I hope you managed to get the time to start trying out the practice, start using the 6 hours, bring that warm feeling up, send it to yourself, send it to your friend. So I hope there's no problem with that. If there is, so tomorrow onwards, we'll be doing daily one-on-one check-ins. Okay. So there is a link that's been sent on the WhatsApp group. There's a WhatsApp group created for the retreat, and on that link, it would have Calendly somewhere in the name. So on that, you can book your slot for a one-on-one interview with me. The other thing you can do is, if none of those time slots work for you, or you end up having to cancel, you can let me know. And there will also be a separate form that we'll share with you. Okay? So this is typically used to capture what's happening in your practice. So during the one-on-one check-ins, the agenda is typically to understand where you are with your practice, if you're facing any challenges, and what you can do, what you can tweak with respect to your practice, or how we can manage that. Right. So it's a very important part of the retreat process. This practice especially has a lot of very identifiable markers. So it's possible to understand, so for someone who has traversed that territory in the past, just like a guide at a in a tourist city would be, right? So the guide over here also typically has the experience of traversing the territory that you would be going in today, right now. Okay, so the idea of the check-ins is to understand where you are and what is the best next course of action that you would have. So if you haven't already, just book the time using Calendly, or we will, after this talk, we will also send the interview form. In case you're not able to make it, then please fill the form up so that we can track your progress and give you the right kind of instruction. So over time, as the retreat goes on, it is not one practice for lifetime that we started with yesterday. The practice will start changing, and it will be personalized and tailored to where you are. So the practice, any modifications that we suggest will be done with a view to maximize your progress going forward. So please do that. Please either fill the form that on the link that will be shared after this talk, or use the Calendly link to schedule a time with me. When it's a short 10-minute catch-up, and we'll be discussing, like I mentioned yesterday, the things that I would like you to note are the duration of your sitting, and how long your mind stayed with the object, stayed with sending that feeling, warm feeling to yourself or to your friend, and how long your mind stayed with that before it got distracted. So those are typically the main questions, and then there are a bunch of other questions that will be there on the form. You can use that, or I will, if we do a one-on-one check-in, I'll be asking those questions directly. So again, also this talk, at the end of every day's evening session, we'll spend around 10 minutes in Q&A. So feel free to ask any questions related to the practice, why we are doing something specific, or what outcomes this is heading towards. So I'm sure there may be some questions on your mind. So please feel free to ask that. Okay. So with that, we'll just start the topic for today. Want to talk more about attention, right? So I think most of us now today, there is a lot of talk about mindfulness, a lot of talk about mental health, a lot of talk about mind wandering and its effects on the overall mental health. So there is a heightened awareness of attention compared to other times, and that is a great thing. I think it is getting a lot of people to actually start working with their attention. So today I just want to discuss a little bit about attention and how the skills that we are developing here. So we've talked about two skills that we'll be using right off the bat, which is mindfulness We'll be using mindfulness to understand when our attention gets caught up with a distraction, gets caught up with a thought. This is not something you have to separately develop. As you start recognizing and as you start acting on it, right? So if you were to recognize that your mind is getting caught up in thought, getting caught up in a distraction, and you do nothing, so your mind learns that maybe this is not something important, to be able to recognize where attention is. But when you take some action on that, when you start using the 6 R's, your mind starts learning that understanding where attention is, understanding where it has gone, whether it is with what we were intending to do, that is something important. And with that, your mindfulness starts to develop for the first time. So that is one skill, and the other skill that we practice is the 6 R's or harmonious practice. So once our attention has gone somewhere that we didn't intend it to go, how can we bring it back without any violence, without any stress? Just understand this is not where we want our mind to be. Recognize, once we've recognized that our mind is somewhere else, we understand this is not where we want it to be. We relax the tension and tightness that is attaching us to that thought, smile, and bring our mind back to our object of meditation. So as we do that and we keep repeating this every time our mind wanders away, we start building the skill, we start building the muscle of mindfulness. Okay? So today we'll be talking a little bit about attention and how we are now starting to use these skills to work with our attention. Okay. I'll just share my screen and start with a few examples that many of us would be familiar with. Okay, before that, I'll just take a minute to just walk you through. This is the retreat daily check-in form. So if you're not able to come in for the interview, you can fill this form up. So it has some basic questions: which retreat, what day of the retreat are you filling the form up for? It's a reminder to the morning routine. So the morning routine is a very important part of the practice. It sets your mind up to pay attention to attention, right? It sets your mind up for that, and ask you about your experience smiling. I hope most of you had the chance to smile a lot through the day. If not, be kind to yourself and just remind yourself that for this retreat, at least, I will maintain a smiling mind, a smiling body as often as possible. Like I mentioned, questions on your longest sitting and whether you did the walking sitting and how long your mind stayed with the object of meditation. Right? So you might see some numbers that really startle you, but you might be surprised that by the end of the retreat, you might actually be hitting numbers that are further down this list. I fully expect a lot of you to get there. It may seem very alien, very absurd at the moment, especially if you've tried the practice for the first time and seen that your mind is all over the place. But the mind is a very, very incredible thing. It learns very quickly. And like we started with the quote yesterday, the mind, when developed and cultivated, there is nothing like it to bring happiness into our lives. Okay, so this is the form. There may also be some things that may happen. That you may feel some joy come up. You may feel some little feeling of disembodiment. You may feel like your body is disappearing and you're with the mind. You may feel that the feeling moves up from your heart to your head. So these are the questions. You can have a look at them. And once we share the form with you, and either you fill them in or we will get this information, we'll discuss this, we'll cover this during the one-on-one check-in. Okay, so I'd like to just quickly spend a little time talking about attention and how this practice is related to attention. So I've got two images here. I'll go one by one. I'll start with the one on the left. Okay. And I'm pretty sure many of you will be able to resonate with some of the things that, the situations that are being described here. The first is a bunch of students in a classroom. So we often think that when we think about the eye, for instance, we think of the eye like a camera, that you have a certain field of vision. You assume everything in it is coming into your mind, you're seeing everything there, and that is the reality that you're encountering. That is the reality you're interpreting, that is the reality you're engaging with, that is the reality you're dealing with. But what happens is our attention actually decides what we decided to pick up. So the first one, a bunch of students in a classroom, they are receiving the same information. They have the same teacher in front of them. They have the same sounds that are coming to them from the teacher, the same teaching that is coming towards them. They have the same things written on the blackboard or whiteboard in front of them. However, their attention may or may not be on the same thing. So it could be anything. It could be your tummy may be starting to rumble. You may be thinking about food that you're going to have. You may be thinking about going out to play as soon as the school ends, the day ends at school. You might be thinking about what it will take to get into the college of your choice. You may be actually paying attention to what's being taught during that class. Right? So even though we receive the same information in terms of visual information, auditory information, other types of information, we may be having a very, very different experience of the same situation depending on where our attention is. So of this group here, does anybody feel that they've ever been in a class where they did not register a single word in over a 5-minute period of time? Just reflect and you can raise your hand if you've experienced something like that. Okay. So the second situation is another situation a lot of us may have experienced, which is we may be sitting with our attention clearly on another person. So this couple having dinner, and you may, even at a restaurant, if you may have noticed that sometimes your mind may be wandering to maybe an important work email that is coming to you. It may be wandering towards what you have to do the next day. It may be wandering towards why is the waiter not here yet. It may be wandering towards what you want to order, or whether you had to compromise with the other person on what you had to order. Right? So your mind may be going to a lot of different places. Right? So at the same moment, you have the choice of having multiple different experiences of life. And our experience of life, right, is essentially a sequence of our attention being placed on different thoughts, different chains of thinking. So the same kind of thought bubbles that I use to show what people might be thinking while they are expected to be doing something else, or even if they're intending to do something else, their mind may be naturally going towards something else. So what we actually pay attention to, we might be told something by someone. How often does it happen that we are asked to do something and it completely goes away from our attention? And sometimes it happens that when we are asked to do something, if we are engaged with something else, thinking about something else, sitting on our smartphone, we might not even register that something was said to us, something was asked of us. So the kind of thoughts that we have, the kind of sequence of attention that is being paid actually determines what our experience of life is. So if there is a question, why pay attention to attention? Well, my answer to that would be that is the first thing we need to pay attention to. More than anything else, where our attention is, how it is engaged there, and whether it is actually helping us do what we intend to do, or has it taken our mind to some place completely different. Right? So understanding those things is very important. That is why uh, it is important to pay attention to attention. I have this other image as well, and this is something very interesting. So all of us have pet areas where our minds wander to. These may change over the course of our lives. These may change as we have different things important in life at different times. Let's assume the gray bubbles are things that we are actually intending, something that we need to do, something we have been asked to do, something we have committed to do for someone else, or something that is necessary for us. So whether it is studying when you're at school, completing a task at work, completing a task at home, having a conversation with somebody that is important to you. So the gray bubbles represent things that we are intending to do. And the red bubbles are something that I like to call rabbit holes. So these are habitual patterns of thinking. So your rabbit hole may be worrying about your health. It may be thinking about what you can do to change your financial situation. It may be thinking about something that was said to you that really upset you. Somebody may have said something and you cannot stop thinking about what that means. Why did that person say to them? How does that make you feel? What you're going to say when you meet them next? So has it ever happened that you found yourself thinking for a long time about what you're going to say to someone else after the conversation? Somebody outsmarts you, outwits you in a conversation, or they say something that is not very charitable, and you spend time later thinking about what you're going to say to them, or what you think of them, or why they were able to get away with that. So these red bubbles, thought bubbles, represent things that are rabbit holes, things that where we find ourselves stuck. And as these rabbit holes get bigger and more serious, the more time we spend with them, they can become more and more detrimental to our mental health. Right? So there may be thoughts again about self-image or self-worth. Right? So am I something that I hear a lot of people, especially today, talk about is their potential. Are they living up to their potential? Seems to have been exacerbated by the ready availability of many different life trajectories that they see other people follow on social media and news that is ubiquitous now. Right? So it may be exacerbated by that, but that is one area that a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking. People think about their body image a lot. You may you may get out of the shower, start getting ready in front of a mirror when you have to go somewhere, but suddenly something about your body disturbs you, and you may spend a lot of time thinking about that. One of the areas that a lot of people think about are their relations and how they would like them to be better, whether it's with parents, whether it's with children, whether it's with colleagues, whether it is with their spouse or partner. That is another area. So the red bubbles are actually things that habitual patterns where we end up going, our mind keeps wandering. So this is often known as the default mode network. So when we are not thinking about a particular task, not engaged in a particular task that we intend to do, our mind starts wandering in different areas and trying to, in a way, it is trying to make sense of the story of our lives. But what happens is these rabbit holes, especially, so these pet subjects that seem to cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of distress, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration in us, we often end up going there and getting stuck in them, spending an inordinate amount of time. And the classic definition of a rabbit hole, obviously the rabbit hole is inspired by the use of this symbolism in Alice in Wonderland. But a rabbit hole is typically described as something that as you go deeper and deeper, you get more questions but not answers. So you can spend a lot of time stuck in them. You can end up neglecting important things that you need to do, that you agreed to do, that you committed to do, that you decided to do. And you may, when you eventually exit them, you may not actually find any relief or find any solutions. So these are some patterns, and this is one of the things that I want the group, each of you, to try and identify in your life and start thinking about this. Okay, so now coming back to the two skills, okay, and one of the first applications that we start looking at doing in daily life. Right? So when we practice, we start with bringing up the warm feeling. We start sending it to ourselves, then we send it to our friend. This is our object of meditation, or this represents one of the gray bubbles, right? This is something that we actually intend to do, that we want to be doing. In the moment, we identified to some extent that this seems to be an activity worth exploring, that might be enriching for us, right? And we decided to do it. But very soon your mind will get distracted in one thing or the other. It's possible it may be something very small, just an email that you have to send or a phone call that you have to make. You may get worried about that. You may also go into some of the rabbit holes during your practice. If not, whatever the distraction is, mindfulness is the alert. So the two exclamation marks that are made here. Mindfulness is the thing that alerts us that our mind is going into a distraction or a rabbit hole. And this is sharpened every time we use the 6 R's. Every time we recognize that our mind is caught up in something that we are not really interested in doing, or that we did not set this time out for doing. And we find that it is stuck there. We recognize it. We let that thought be. We release it. We relax the tension and tightness. So the tension and tightness, this is something important that I wanted to bring up today. We will be discussing a lot more about this. Tension and tightness that you feel in your mind. By now, some of you, or hopefully most of you, would have started identifying this, that whenever our mind is caught up in a distraction, there is some tightness. If you have gone through the beginning practice instructions, there are a few examples given that can help you identify what we talk about when we say tension or tightness. Unlike maybe a physical exercise, it's difficult for me to actually demonstrate what that might look like. So we've used some examples of times that you may feel that tension and tightness. So this tension and tightness is a tangible symptom of a mechanism called craving. This is a mechanism that we cover in a lot more detail as we go through this retreat. But tension and tightness is a symptom of craving, and by relaxing the tension and tightness, we also diffuse the craving. And craving is the mental mechanism that is actually keeping us stuck in these distractions or stuck in these rabbit holes. It is what attaches us to these patterns of thinking. It is what makes us feel that there is no way out. I have to think through this, I have to resolve this, or I have to ruminate about this. Okay. So as we use the 6 R's, as we recognize this is not what we started out to do, as we release it, we let that thought be, we don't go following after it, and we relax the tension and tightness, we start reducing the very thing that is binding our attention to this thought, which is the craving. We start relaxing it. And when we smile, if there is any craving left over, we start diffusing that as well. And then we return our attention to the object of meditation. We are back to the gray bubble, the thing that we intended to do. And over time, as we keep doing this, our mind not only learns to be mindful, our 6 R's, use of 6 R's starts becoming more automatic. And our mind also understands that the repeated signals, that we don't want to be in these red bubbles, we want to be with the gray bubbles, and it starts staying here for a longer period of time. This is something called collectedness that we'll come to. You will start experiencing it as you continue through the retreat. We will also unpack what it means to be collected, why is that a beneficial state of mind, and how it can help you not only in your practice, not only in understanding, gaining a deeper understanding of mind, but also help you in being more effective in life as you go about performing other tasks. So today I just wanted to touch on this. I don't want to introduce more concepts right now. I want you to actually spend time observing this in your life, in your practice, right? So in your practice, understand when your mind is caught up in a distraction, that it is actually something that is brought upon by that tension and tightness that is attaching you to it. When you use the 6 hours, you diffuse it, and you are also teaching your mind to stay with the object of meditation. The second thing I want you to do is, and I'll be sharing this exercise over the WhatsApp group. So as we go about our daily activities, start noting when your mind goes down a rabbit hole. Okay? So start identifying especially what are those patterns of thinking that are very, very common for you. So everyone will have their own favorite rabbit hole. So it may be, for many people, it is related to, like I said, your self-image, whether it is the story of yourself, or whether it is something as simple as body image, or some capability that you have or don't have to a certain extent. So thinking about self, thinking of yourself as successful, unsuccessful, prosperous, poverty-stricken, fortunate, unfortunate. So that could be an entire pattern of thinking. Thinking about your relationship with someone, parents, children, spouse, partner, friends, colleagues. Thinking about your relation with somebody. It could be related to worrying about the future. It could be related to something that happened in the past. It could also be something as mundane as some spending time on your smartphone. So if you don't intend to do it, and if you end up doing it, and you don't end up realizing where your attention has gone, and now it is stuck there, that qualifies to be defined as a rabbit hole. So start identifying what are those different patterns in your life that are happening without your intention, that are happening without something that is needed to be done, but are happening on their own. Your mind starts wandering and going down a rabbit hole. Second thing we want to do is, even if you're not practicing your walking meditation, if you're not practicing your sitting meditation, whenever you identify that your mind is going down a rabbit hole, use the 6 hours. Bring your mind back to sending metta to your friend. So if you're already distracted with something, you are already not doing whatever you had decided to do what you were intending to do. So before getting back to that task, just for a while, reuse the 6 hours, bring your mind back to sending metta to your friend, sending that warm wish, and then you can bring it to the task that you were doing before you were distracted. If the task is urgent, you can use the 6 hours, and instead of returning to metta, you return to the task. Start making a note of the rabbit holes that are very persistent. What are the things that seem to suck your attention away? What are the things that are determining your experience of life without you actually intending them, without you planning them, without you committing to them? Just something that is sucking away your attention. So as we go through the retreat with the other skills, the other understanding, what we want to do is we want to start going deeper and deeper into a single movement of attention, right? So going from one thought bubble to the next. So whether it is something you intended to do, whether it is something you did not intend, how is it that attention that was staying somewhere that you intended it to be, how is it that it went away from that and went to something else and then got stuck? So you'll be working through this through the retreat, and you will start understanding more and more. You teach yourself how to understand this, how to make sense of how your attention is moving, how to create a course of better action for yourself, how to create skill with attention to be able to identify where it is going, to be able to bring it back when it is going. Right? The other thing I want you to also do is not just in your practice, but in your daily life. Notice if there was any tension in your mind when your mind was stuck in that pattern, and whether it went away when you use the 6 hours. So start becoming more familiar with that tension. So this will actually become the cue for your mindfulness. That tension and tightness building up in your mind because your mind got distracted, got stuck with something else. It will start becoming a cue. So start making a note of this. This is something, even if it is something very personal, you should note it down. You can discuss it during the one-on-one check-ins, but you don't need to feel obliged to do so. Like I discussed, like I mentioned right at the beginning, this retreat is intended to make you capable of understanding your mind and working with your mind to create happier mind states for yourself. Right? So we can discuss specific things. We can look at understanding how attention is going down those specific patterns of thinking, or we can simply look at the skills and start applying the skills. So this is the first exercise. Again, we will be covering a few more concepts over the next few days. We'll be starting to understand how the rabbit holes are also different flavors. So there is a big difference between having a lot of doubt or self-doubt, lack of confidence, or thinking about something that did not go your way in the recent past, or getting stuck in your smartphone. So there are different flavors of these rabbit holes that you will also start understanding. We'll start unpacking this. We'll start unpacking more about what is the mechanism by which attention goes away. Why is it that we are evolutionarily configured to have these kind of movements of attention, and what is it that with the right skills we can train our attention and experience of life to look like. So we'll start unpacking these. For now, I just wanted to reiterate today why paying attention to attention is important, how attention dictates our experience of life, and how attention that has a tendency of going into undesired states, unwholesome states, how it can be identified. The movement of attention going there can be identified, and we can bring it back without any violence, without any forcing the issue. Gently and with skill, we can bring it back to what we intend to do. So just wanted to highlight that the practice that you're doing, the skills that you're developing already, how they're going to help you do that. And we'll cover more of this through the course of the retreat. So just wanted to bring that up. Tomorrow is the beginning of the weekend. So I would really hope that a lot of you can get in a lot of practice. We will have our first of our check-ins. So as I said, mentioned right in the beginning, please book your slot with me, or you can fill up the form that we'll share with you on the WhatsApp group. And I will respond to that on email if you are unable to have a live one-on-one check. So every day you work with these skills, we'll discuss and we'll start seeing where it is taking us and how we can use it to bring more and more skill and depthness into our experience of life. So that's the short discussion for today. Happy to hear any thoughts, any questions, any doubts you might have from whatever we've discussed so far, from your practice, your experiments with practicing today, anything that is bothering you in terms of how to use the 6 hours, or anything that is confusing you with regards to the object of meditation. So we'll have a brief Q&A, and tomorrow onwards we'll start going deeper into the mechanisms of the mind. So I couldn't really see when I had the screen up. So I had asked a couple of questions, right? How many of you find that yourself actually completely forgetting or completely not registering something someone has said to you or asked to you? Does anyone relate to that? Okay. And how often does it happen that you realize you've wasted I know there are a bunch of engineers here, so that you've wasted an entire afternoon doing something when you were intending to do something else. I know engineers and video games or like gaming, that happens a lot, but I'm sure people who are not engineers will also have experiences like that. You decided to do something and you have no idea how. Have you ever used the phrase, I have no idea how time got away from me? Start with myself. Okay, great. So that's what we're trying to do. We are essentially trying to build the skills to start understanding our attention, and we don't think of attention this way. Normally we think, okay, this is what I did, or this is what happened. We look at the entire event. Okay, I wasted my entire afternoon, or I forgot. But what we don't understand is there is a actual underlying mechanism of attention. So the attention is like the CEO of our mind body system. It decides what is the experience that we have, what is the initiative we are going to invest in, what are the things that we're going to fix this quarter, what do we want our share price to look like. So that is what the attention is doing. But we always think in terms of the story that happened, that okay, this happened, this got forgotten, this time got wasted. We don't look at the very minute movements of attention that are happening and how that is actually dictating how our experience of life is. And that's what we want to explore and unpack through this week. Great. So if there are any questions, please do so. I don't see too many slots booked on my calendar. So if we can actually take a couple of minutes and actually book those today itself, those of you who can do the live check-in. Otherwise, we'll send the form to you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Sarah.
Hello. I wondered if you could share your tips around rabbit holes in interpersonal dynamics. So, because this is where it gets so much more complicated, and you can find you're fully in one and a whole scenario has kicked off, and then the spiritual friend is a little bit removed from the situation. Yeah. So I just wanted to know what you would suggest for us.
So again, I would just say one thing. So whether it is interpersonal, whether it is related to yourself. So these rabbit holes are related to the story of our world that we tell ourselves. So this is me, these are people, different people, this is my relationship with those people. So we are always, and we'll go in much deeper detail in this, but we are always looking at stories of different things, right? And the rabbit holes are typically stories that make you uncomfortable, that are unresolved, right? You want something to change, you want something out of it. So for example, all of us have, I think the group is, I can say with confidence that this group has gone through teenage years, and I'm sure at some point you were infatuated with somebody or the other, right? So your mind can have a lot of huge unresolved rabbit hole against related to wanting something, right? I want this, but what is happening? The story in my mind is that if this happens, what I want, if I get it, then life will start. My life begins then, or my happiness begins then. So we have that story, and the signals that we're getting from the world tell us that that's not the reality. So the rabbit holes are always where we expect something, we want something. It is each of these rabbit holes, each of these distractions is telling us where we are attached, right? What we say is crucial for our happiness. What story we have constructed in our mind that this thing, if it goes my way, this will be great for me. This is what I want. This is crucial for my happiness. My happiness is dependent on this. So not just interpersonal situations, but when it comes to anything, it may come to your health, it may come to your career, it may come to your financial situation. So this is always And often there is not an action to be taken, especially when we look at things that are in the past. Somebody said something to me, somebody behaved something in some way, and we keep going with that because there is no way to change what happened in the past. The signals that are coming from the past are different from what we like. And it comes from the basic understanding that we have decided that we want the world to be in a certain way. We want the world to be in a certain configuration for us to be happy. And then we get caught in these loops, caught in these rabbit holes when the world says that, okay, we are not, the rest of the 8 billion humans and the other beings and natural forces are not here to cooperate to make your world exactly as it is. So that's essentially the rabbit hole. As long as we find that there is a friction between what we want life to be and what the signals are coming from life, right? So many of these uh, rabbit holes are related to what we want or what we don't want, right? So we want somebody to behave in a certain way that will make us happy. When they don't behave that way, even though we know from past experience that they're unlikely to behave that way, we know that they're going to say exactly the kind of thing that will make us unhappy. When that happens, we are still not able to resolve that, right? Our mind goes into that rabbit hole. But then there can be other flavors of rabbit holes. It can be simply restlessness, it can be laziness. You can have a completely dull time because you don't feel motivated to do something. So that can be a rabbit hole in itself, a rabbit hole of dullness. You can have a rabbit hole of restlessness, that you want something to do. Your mind is continuously seeking information because it thinks maybe there is some information that will take me out of this restlessness, right? And you can have rabbit holes of self-doubt. Can I do things? Can I not do? This is something we'll unpack a lot more tomorrow. But the idea is, the first step for us is to start understanding that the way we experience those moments, the way we felt in those moments, and the way our thought process went is starting from the fact that we got stuck in that rabbit hole. When we are not in that rabbit hole, when we are not swimming in that thought process, our attitude towards it can be very different. But when we go into that rabbit hole, we become small, we become restricted. Our degrees of freedom get limited by the story that we have of that rabbit hole. So the first step in moving on. So eventually what we want to do is, the first skill that we want to do is to be able to identify that our mind is in a rabbit hole, and we want to be able to get it out of that. As we start developing our mind, we want to start understanding that these rabbit holes are patterns of thought that only exist in our mind. That specific interpretation of events, that specific interpretation of what it means for us, why it is important to us, that we are actually the creators of that thought process. And we don't give ourselves enough credit, enough agency to be able to change that thought process, change that world of that rabbit hole that we have created. And over time, as we start understanding this, these rabbit holes actually start to become inconsequential and disappear. This happens even naturally many times. Over time you may have had some upsetting, sometimes there are upsetting events in childhood that carry on and traumatize us for a very long time. But there may be other things that over a period of time your mind understood that there is absolutely no use even thinking about this. A lot of the standard process of grieving or forgiveness moves along like that. But when we understand these things, we can not only accelerate that process of making those rabbit holes disappear, making them not important for us, making them not become a sink for our attention and our time, but we can also start understanding and steering clear of them. So not only, we can steer clear of them, we can identify them, we don't spend time in them, and over time we can make them inconsequential, and over time we can start seeing that for other rabbit holes. We can start identifying that. So that's how we want to take our skill. uh, Interpersonal relations is a specific and very important case of or type of rabbit hole, but eventually it is something that we didn't intend to do, but our mind kept going there and kept getting stuck there. So the first thing we'll do is learn how to bring it out gently. then we'll start understanding why is it that this thing bothers us, and what is it that we can actually do about this situation and about our attention going. Rahul, you have a question?
So actually, I have a couple of questions, but one just on the topic of rabbit holes. So yesterday you had mentioned that there will be distractions, or now we've been introduced to this term rabbit holes, which will require us to 6 hour and come out of it and come to the object of meditation, right? But there is also a bit of clutter that is not necessarily a rabbit hole and is just like a distracting undertone. And I don't know if this is maybe the right phraseology for this, but in my head it could be something as simple as like a song or a tune that plays, which is almost like a earworm. It is not distracting me completely from my object of meditation, because I'm able to observe myself experiencing both, focusing on the meditation as well as experiencing this other distraction. But there are times when it suddenly does manifest itself into a rabbit hole, and then and then I find myself being stuck in actually playing that tune or that song in my head. You know what I mean? So how does one distinguish between the two, firstly? And secondly, how does one prevent this distraction from actually becoming, or from becoming the all consuming rabbit hole itself?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Excellent question, Rahul. So
Okay.
actually, there are a few aspects to this. So the first thing is something you mentioned, that something happening in the background. So this has still not completely taken over your attention. So your attention, we always have something like, for example, if you're looking at the screen right now, you have peripheral vision, right? So our mind always has peripheral vision, whether it is in the visual field or whether it is in the field of awareness, right? So we need to be alert, right? So if we are not alert like that, we become the proverbial sitting ducks, right? So if your attention is so involved in something that somebody can come and push you over, or the roof can there can be an earthquake and you don't realize that there is an earthquake. So you cannot be in a position where you're completely unaware of what else is happening, right, in the course of daily life. So there is always this peripheral awareness that is happening. So if that music or tune is there in the periphery, that's fine, let it be. Anything that comes up, right? So some part of your attention is what is sustaining, right? If you, for example, there are a bunch of you're sitting on a chair or a sofa or a couch right now, right? But probably there are many times during this discussion that you did not actually think about it actively, that you're sitting there. So there is information, there is that contact between your legs and the surface that you're sitting on, that is happening. It is there. If it were to move, you would understand that it is moving and check if something is happening. So there is some small part of your attention that is there, but it is not taking away from the main thing that you're focusing on. So that is fine. Again, you lose your awareness of that, because after a while we realize that there is nothing very serious or very interesting happening with the fact that I'm sitting on a sofa, right? And your attention stops focusing on that. So there is no focus on that. As soon as you sit somewhere, for instance, you'll feel that. If you get into cold water, you'd feel that difference in water temperature. But after a while, you don't worry about it, because the bodies understand that, hey, water at this temperature is coming continuously. So the fact that it is cold is not really new or interesting information. So the same thing happens, right? So they let it be in the periphery. After a while, your mind understands this is something I'm not really interested in. It will die down. Alternately, your mind might go chasing after that. So that is a distraction. A distraction is something that takes your mind away. When I said rabbit hole is specifically, so you might have a distraction related to a sound. You might have a distraction related to one thing that you're supposed to do tomorrow, right? It will come and it will go. So when I talk about rabbit hole, these are actually more persistent and more personal uh, patterns of thought where you get stuck. So we all know that we have these pet patterns of thought, but we never actually do an inventory or try to note how often we are doing it in our life, or how much time we actually spend in those rabbit holes. So that specifically, I want each of you to actually reflect about what are those specific loops of thinking where your mind is really getting stuck. So those are they are the boss level distractions in your mind. And by the end of the retreat, I want to work with each of you for you to be able to develop a strategy for all those boss level distractions. Did you have a follow-up question, or is the hand raised from before?
Sorry, I did have a separate question, but that can wait.
Did this answer what you were asking?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay, you can ask your follow-up as well, and I think then we'll go to Amaraj.
Okay. So the other question was more about the practice itself, which is, so after having spent 10-15 minutes at the when I start my sitting, I am focusing on myself, on creating that warm and fuzzy feeling, the happiness, right? And then I need to essentially project it outwards to my spiritual friend, right? So hasn't the so I tried it today, but so when I was sending loving kindness or happiness to myself, I had a different object of meditation. Whereas when I started sending it to my spiritual friend, the object of meditation transitioned to my spiritual friend itself or himself, right? So is that okay? Is this natural?
Interesting question.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, great question again. So again, I think one of the things that I was trying to demonstrate with my very low-fi, poor quality illustrations was between what we intend to do and where our mind actually ends up, right? That is the contrast. So it's okay to have different objects of meditation fundamentally, right? So fundamentally, there is something that you intend to do and your mind is actually going off something. And what we want to learn is that process, that we intended to do something, we place our attention somewhere and it went somewhere else, right? How did this happen, right? We want to break down, we want to really get into a slow motion replay of this process and really start understanding this. So that is why we use our object of meditation to bring it back again, okay? So it's okay to change. The other thing that we want to do is, these are with the practice, sending it to yourself, sending it to a friend. So these are a mind that is open and generous. That is not so. If you think about what we've been talking over the last few minutes as well, right? So rabbit holes, the red bubbles, are things that we take very personally. Things where we are thinking about what it means to us, what it means to our future, how we feel about it. We are thinking more and more about ourselves. So one of the things we do by starting to send the wish to our friend, and later on we'll expand this circle of generosity, right? We create a lot of contrast between a mind that is giving and generous and open, and a mind that is worried and frightened and insecure, right? So by doing this, by creating this contrast, we are actually helping our mindfulness. We are giving our mindfulness a little boost so that it can start identifying, okay, when I go into that red bubble, my mind is going to be stuck about what do I need to do, what will happen if I don't do it, what will it cost me, what will it mean for me. So that thinking me, right? So that has a big contrast with sending that feeling of generosity to your friend. Because we are all inherently greedy creatures. So we start by filling our belly up first, and then we start sharing with our friend. And as we start nurturing this, we'll find it easy to start with the friends and start with other people. And with each of you, I'll be spending time to understand, where you are, whether you're ready to start expanding your circle of generosity. And it's okay if it takes a little time, because we've been conditioned on a lifetime of always thinking about me. Right? So, yeah. Okay, Amaranth, you had a question?
Hey, Ali. Yeah. Actually, first of all, thank you for that interpretation of rabbit holes as something that's an outcome of a craving. I myself was trying to work with a therapist on regarding negative thoughts, but you know, this concept of this being an outcome of something else and not just being something that's built into my sort of mind is, I think, could kind of help me work on that. I actually wanted to sort of ask a bit about 6 hours in terms of the practice itself. Um, I mean, in order to build it as a muscle memory, should we do it as, I mean, should there be a time that you devote to each of the steps initially? Because I mean, in my practice, I realized that, I'm kind of like running through the first 4 hours, and would there be like a proper way of doing it, something that could help me build it, a better sort of habit out of it in the longer term?
I think that's a very, very good question, and I think it'll be useful for people in the group. So, you've learned how to drive a car, right? So it's just like that in the beginning, and I'm assuming you learned on a manual transmission, right? So, what do you need to press first? An accelerator, clutch, brake, gear change. It's all very confusing in the beginning, right? So it's better to do it one by one. Make sure you're getting the steps right, right? So over a few seconds, right? And you don't need to make any big commentaries, right? So in the practice instructions, you've talked about, understand that attention is gone to something, release, let it be, don't engage with. And also in the longer version, there is an entire paragraph devoted to each step. You don't need to go through that entire process, right? But what is important is, one, understanding that you don't have to fight with the distraction. You have to release, you have to let it be. Don't have to be irritated with it, don't have to chase after it. Right? So that is important. Relaxing the tension and tightness is also very important, because that is the basis, that is what is keeping you stuck in the rabbit hole, right? So it is like a ball and chain that is used to weight people, right? So it is actually pulling you down into that rabbit hole. So that tension and relaxing that tension and tightness is important. And the smile is something that starts your journey back to a wholesome state. So it's fine to initially just take a little bit of time. You may initially need to verbalize, recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return. Over time, you don't need to verbalize anything. You don't, and they will become one quick motion. Just like changing the gear becomes a very quick, natural, single motion. Right? It's a fluid motion when you start getting confidence in driving. So the same way with the 6 hours. So over a period of time, it may take 1 or 2 seconds, right? So it may be able to do that. The second thing is not to fight to make the tension absolutely zero. Just relax. Just know you're relaxing. Okay, you don't need to fight with it again, right? Otherwise, there'll be more tension that you'll be creating. So just let it be. Relax the tension and tightness, and smile and come back, right? So over time, what will happen is, so even when you reduce some of that tension and tightness, it makes a difference to how you are attached, or how badly you are stuck in that rabbit hole. The repeat step actually essentially says that the same thought, the same distraction might come, but it is fine. It is part of how your mind is already configured, right? So by now you're already getting an idea that you are not making things happen. Things are coming up and you are getting stuck in them. So you didn't decide that after 45 seconds, I'm going to start thinking about something. So it came up and your mind started following. So that's fine. You don't need to engage in battle. Just remember that, do the steps sequentially in the beginning, and over time it will start becoming natural. So don't force that process. Just let it be natural and have some confidence, right? So again, while driving, while learning to ride a bike, initially you feel you're going to get it wrong. You might even wonder how so many people manage to do something so complex. But you just have to apply yourself, stick with it, and over time you will find that it becomes very simple and natural.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions, or we can wrap up for today and dive into our weekend of loving ourselves and our friend? Excellent. Okay. Thanks everyone for coming. Let's share some merit. And please do book your interview slots for tomorrow or fill in your form. Okay, we'll start the interviews tomorrow, and we'll start, working on your paths, in your personal path through this process. Great. I'll just share on the screen the there, and we'll stop the session. Yeah, quick reminder for tomorrow before we share minutes. When this day is starting to get deeper into your practice, 30 minutes is a minimum recommendation. You might actually find that you're finding it easier to sit longer. If it is possible, don't get up. Continue with it. The more we sit, the more our mind. So our mind learns a lot in one continued session than it does in multiple smaller sessions. So if you can stay longer, stay with that. This is a little optimistic from me, but if it is possible, if your schedule, if your commitments allow you, do more than 2 sittings and start making notes. So the exercise, again, I want you to specifically note down either from recollection of your recent past or from your experience in daily life. Start identifying those specific rabbit holes, those things that suck away a lot of your attention and leave you unhappy and unresolved at the end of it. You haven't really reached somewhere, you haven't solved anything, you haven't made any progress, and you know that you're going to end up spending time in this rabbit hole again. So just start making a note of those. Start seeing what happens when you use this class, when your mind goes into one of those rabbits. Okay, let's share some merit. Invite everyone to join me and mute yourself. May suffering ones be suffering free.
Suffering free.
Fear struck fearlessly.
The fear struck fearless. Grieving, shadow grief.
And may
May
all
beings find relief.
May all beings
May all beings share this merit
that we have
thus acquired.
For the acquisition of
all kind
happiness.
May enlightened beings
Enlightened beings of mighty power
in this merit.
share
sharing this merit of ours.
May they long protect
they
the
long
Protect
protect Buddha's dispensation.
dispensation.
We'll also start the group meditation from tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. India time. So people in other time zones, I understand that it may be inconvenient for you to join. So my request is to do your morning routine definitely, and then sitting as per your schedule. So see you in the morning, and for those who can't join in the morning, I'll see you tomorrow evening. Have a lovely day. Keep smiling.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.